The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never seen such chaos. Representatives from 300 different worlds filled the massive chamber, their voices mixing into a sound like a storm. Some beings looked like giant crystals that sang when they spoke. Others were small and furry with 6 arms each. A few floated in special tanks filled with glowing water. All of them were afraid. Hyunwoo sat in the small section marked for Earth. He was the only human in the entire hall. Most species barely knew humans existed. Earth had joined the Galactic Council only 50 years ago. In a galaxy where some civilizations were millions of years old, humans were still babies. The main screen at the front of the hall showed a star map. Red dots marked where the enemy had struck. There were so many red dots now that whole sections of the galaxy looked like they were bleeding. "The Kepler system is gone," announced the council leader. She was a tall, blue creature with 4 arms and silver eyes. That makes 47 star systems consumed in the last month. A crystal being near the front made a sound like breaking glass. This was how his people showed fear. "The Devourers move faster than we predicted. Our calculations were wrong." Hyunwoo had studied the reports about these Devourers. They were ancient things that woke up every million years to feed. They ate everything: planets, stars, even empty space itself. When they finished with a star system, nothing remained, not even dust. "What do our fleets report?" asked the council leader. A floating creature in a water tank answered. Bubbles rose from where his mouth should be. "The 5th Combined Fleet engaged them at Rigel 7. We lost every ship. 3,000 vessels destroyed in 20 minutes. Worried sounds filled the hall. The 5th Combined Fleet was the strongest military force in the galaxy. Ships from 50 different worlds had worked together for decades. If they could not stop the Devourers, what could? "The Zenthari Hive offers its remaining forces," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The Zenthari were millions of connected minds sharing one consciousness. "Our bioships can adapt quickly to enemy tactics." "No," said the Blue Council leader. "You have already lost 60% of your fleet. We cannot afford to lose the rest." The hall fell quiet. Everyone was thinking the same thing. If the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy could not stop the Devourers, then the galaxy was doomed. Hyunwoo stood up slowly. His movement caught some attention, but not much. Humans were so new that most beings forgot they were even there. "Earth offers assistance," he said in a clear voice. The hall went silent. Then laughter began. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that comes from surprise. The crystal beings made sounds like wind chimes in a storm. The water creatures blew bubbles rapidly. "Human representative," said the council leader gently. "Your species has been in space for less than 200 years. Your ships are powered by primitive fusion reactors. Your weapons are kinetic projectiles and nuclear explosives." More polite laughter filled the hall. Hyunwoo waited for it to stop. "Your fleets are very small," continued the council leader. "Earth has perhaps 1,000 warships total. The 5th Combined Fleet alone had 3,000 vessels, and they were destroyed in minutes." "We understand the situation," Hyunwoo replied. "But we still offer assistance." A fuzzy creature with 6 arms waved them all in the air. "Honorable human, this enemy has consumed civilizations that were building starships when your species was still in caves. They have faced weapons that can destroy entire moons with a single shot. What could Earth possibly do that we cannot?" Hyunwoo looked around the hall. He saw fear in every face, no matter how alien. These beings had lived in peace for so long that they had forgotten how to fight a real war. "Give us the coordinates," he said simply. "We will handle this." The hall exploded with noise again. This time it was not laughter, but shocked whispers. Some beings seemed insulted, others appeared confused. The council leader raised one of her 4 hands for silence. "Human representative, I appreciate your courage, but sending Earth's small fleet against the Devourers would be suicide. It would accomplish nothing except the destruction of your entire species." "Maybe," said Hyunwoo, "but Earth has dealt with monsters before." Before anyone could respond, alarms began ringing throughout the hall. The main screen changed to show a live feed from somewhere in space. A beautiful blue world hung in the darkness, surrounded by space stations and defensive platforms. "This is the Zenthari homeworld," whispered the floating creature in the water tank. "It is happening right now." The screen showed dark shapes moving toward the planet. They looked like giant black teardrops, each one the size of a moon. As they got closer, the planet began to change. The blue oceans turned gray. The white clouds became black smoke. "Evacuation ships are launching," reported someone in the hall. 30 million Zenthari are escaping to nearby systems." But the dark shapes moved faster than the fleeing ships. They reached out with invisible hands and pulled the evacuation vessels back toward the dying planet. On the screen, everyone watched as millions of lives were snuffed out in seconds. The planet itself was shrinking now. The Devourers were eating it from the inside out. Within an hour, nothing remained where the Zenthari homeworld had been. Not even an asteroid field, just empty space. The hall was completely silent now. Some beings were crying. Others sat frozen in shock. The Zenthari voice was gone completely. Their hive mind had been mostly destroyed along with their homeworld. The council leader spoke in a whisper. 48 systems lost. The Devourers are accelerating their consumption rate." Hyunwoo stood up again. This time, every being in the hall looked at him. "Earth repeats its offer," he said calmly. "Give us the coordinates. Tell us where they are going next. We will stop them." "How?" demanded the crystal being, his voice like breaking bells. "How can primitive humans succeed where we have failed?" Hyunwoo thought about Earth's history. Wars that lasted decades. Battles fought on every continent and every ocean. Weapons designed for one purpose only, to kill efficiently and completely. "Because," he said quietly, "we remember how to be monsters when we need to be." The hall fell silent again. This time the silence felt different. It was not the silence of fear or shock. It was the silence of beings who suddenly realized they might be looking at their salvation, or at something more terrifying than the Devourers themselves. Admiral Taemin stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Command Station, watching through the massive windows as humanity prepared for war. Ships filled the space around Earth like angry metal wasps. Construction platforms worked day and night, building vessels at a speed that amazed even the humans themselves. "Status report," Taemin ordered. His aide, Commander Hae-jin, checked her tablet. 16,000 warships completed in the last month. Production rate is increasing daily. The lunar shipyards are ahead of schedule. And the special projects? The kinetic bombardment platforms are ready. The relativistic kill vehicles are being loaded into their launchers. The gravity well generators passed all tests yesterday. Taemin nodded. Other species had offered their advanced weapons technology. plasma cannons that could melt asteroids, energy shields that stopped any known attack, computer systems that could think faster than biological minds. Earth had politely declined most of it. "Sir," said another officer, "we are receiving another transmission from the Altaran Empire. They want to know why we refuse their quantum disruptors." "Tell them we appreciate the offer," Taman replied, "but we prefer weapons we understand completely." This was true. Human engineers had studied alien technology for 50 years. Most of it was incredibly advanced, but it was also incredibly complex. It took years to learn how to use properly. Humans did not have years. Instead, Earth's factories were building weapons that any human soldier could understand in minutes. Rail guns that threw chunks of metal at tremendous speeds. Nuclear warheads that could crack planets. Kinetic kill vehicles that were simply very heavy objects moving very fast. Simple, reliable, devastating. On the observation deck, Sergeant Sung Ho was training his Marines. These were not the peacekeeping forces that usually represented Earth in space. These were soldiers trained for one job, killing efficiently. "Remember," Sung Ho told his troops, "these devourers are big. They regenerate damage quickly. Our job is to hit them so hard and so fast that they cannot recover." A young Marine raised her hand. "Sergeant, the briefings say these creatures can reshape matter at the molecular level. How do we fight something like that?" Sung Ho smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "The same way our ancestors fought bigger, stronger predators. We hunt in packs. We use tools. We never fight fair." In the tactical center, analyst Yun-ji was studying every piece of data about the Devourers. The Galactic Council had shared everything they knew. Battle reports, sensor readings, even some recovered wreckage. "Interesting," she muttered, staring at her screens. "What did you find?" asked her supervisor. "The Devourers are not actually invincible," Yunji explained. "Look at these energy readings. When they reshape matter, there is a power drain. About 30 seconds after each use, they are vulnerable. 30 seconds? That's not very long." "Long enough," Yunji said with confidence, "if you know exactly what to do with those 30 seconds. Above Earth, Captain So Young commanded the observation ship Taeguk. Her job was to watch the border regions and report Devourer movements. But the Taeguk was more than just a scout ship. Hidden in its hull were some of humanity's most secret weapons." "Captain," reported her sensor officer, "the alien fleets are retreating from the Vega system. The Devourers will reach it in 6 days." "And our response?" "Third Fleet is moving to intercept. Estimated arrival time is 4 days." So Young frowned. Most species were running from the Devourers. They evacuated entire star systems, trying to save as many lives as possible. Humans were doing the opposite. They were moving toward the enemy. But that was not the strangest part. Earth was also evacuating systems, but not to save lives. They were removing everything useful and leaving behind something else. Traps. Dr. Jin Ho worked in a secret laboratory deep beneath Seoul. His job was to study the few pieces of Devourer tissue that had been recovered over the centuries. Most scientists thought this tissue was impossible to analyze. It changed constantly, becoming different materials every few minutes. But Jin Ho was not trying to understand what the tissue was. He was trying to understand what it wanted to become. "The cellular structure is designed for rapid adaptation," he explained to his team. "But that also means it is vulnerable to confusion. If we can feed it the wrong information, it will adapt in the wrong direction," finished his assistant. "Exactly. We can turn their greatest strength into a weakness." News of Earth's preparations spread throughout the galaxy. Other species watched in amazement and growing concern. The humans were not just building a military force. They were reshaping their entire civilization for war. Factories that once made civilian goods now produced ammunition. Scientists who once studied peaceful technologies now designed new ways to destroy things. Even children were being taught basic military tactics in school. The crystal beings of Altara sent a diplomatic message. We are grateful for human assistance, but we are concerned about the militarization of your entire species. Admiral Taemin's response was simple. You asked us to dispatch monsters. To do that effectively, we must become something they fear. The Zenthari survivors, what few remained of their hive mind, were the most disturbed. Humans coordinate their military actions with frightening efficiency. They think like a hive mind, but each individual retains independence. This should be impossible. But it was not impossible. It was simply how humans had always fought their worst enemies. Not as individuals and not as a true collective, but as a pack. Each member was independent and could think for themselves, but they all worked toward the same goal. The goal was simple: complete destruction of the Devourers. Commander Wu Jin managed the massive supply lines feeding the human war machine. Ships carried ammunition, fuel, and food to staging areas throughout human space. But they also carried something else. The Bio-Warfare Division has finished their work, he reported to Admiral Taemin. The modified viruses are ready for deployment, and they will only affect devourer tissue. Yes, sir. The viruses are designed to target their cellular adaptation process. They will cause the devourers to attack their own biological systems. This was another thing that worried the other species. Humans did not just fight with guns and explosives. They used biological weapons, information warfare, and psychological tactics. They fought dirty, and they were very good at it. As the first human fleets moved toward the border regions, alien observers noted something strange about their formation. The ships did not spread out to cover more space, like most military forces would do. Instead, they clustered together in tight groups. They are vulnerable to area effect weapons, observed an Altaran military analyst. But humans had studied the Devourers' attack patterns. They knew that the creatures did not use area effect weapons. They preferred to consume their enemies one by one, feeding on each victory. Human fleet formations were designed to exploit this preference. The Devourers hunted like solitary predators. Humans hunted like wolves. 3 days before the first battle, Admiral Taemin received a message from the Galactic Council. They wanted to know if Earth needed any assistance. Supply ships, medical support, perhaps some advisor species who had fought the Devourers before. Taemin's reply was brief. Thank you, but no. We work better alone. This was not entirely true. Humans could cooperate with other species when needed. But for this kind of war, they preferred to rely on methods that other species might find disturbing. As the human fleets approached their first engagement with the Devourers, news spread throughout the galaxy. Some species prayed for human victory. Others wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. The crystal beings of Altara asked each other, what if the cure is worse than the disease? But it was too late for such questions. The humans were already moving, and they would not stop until every last devourer was dead, or until they themselves were consumed in the attempt. The Kepler 442 system had been beautiful once. 3 inhabited worlds, dozens of mining stations, and trade routes that connected 5 different species. Now it belonged to the Devourers. Commander Dong-hyun watched the enemy through the bridge, screens of his assault carrier, Soul's Fury. The Devourers had built something in the center of the system where the main trade station used to be. It looked like a massive black flower made of metal and flesh, with petals that moved like they were breathing. "Sensor readings?" he asked. 12 large bioships, reported his tactical officer. Each one about the size of a moon. Hundreds of smaller vessels. They are feeding on the asteroid belt. Dong-hyun nodded. The Devourers were eating everything they could find, converting matter into more of themselves. This was how they worked. They consumed a system completely, then moved to the next one. But today they would face something new. "Signal the fleet," Dong-hyun ordered. "Begin Phase 1. Around the Soul's Fury, 300 human warships moved into position. They did not charge straight at the enemy like the previous galactic fleets had done. Instead, they spread out in a wide circle around the system. Lieutenant Min-ji sat in the cockpit of her fighter craft, waiting for the order to launch. She had studied the recordings of previous battles. Every species had tried to fight the Devourers. The same way. Big ships against big ships, powerful weapons against powerful defenses. All of them had lost. "Fighter squadrons, prepare for launch," came the order through her headset. "Remember your training. We are not trying to destroy them in a single attack. We are trying to make them angry." Min-ji smiled inside her helmet. Making enemies angry was something humans understood very well. On the bridge of the Soul's Fury, Weapons Officer Jae-sung watched his targeting computer track the Devourer bioships. Each one was enormous, covered in what looked like black armor that shifted and moved like liquid. Previous attacks had barely scratched them, but Jae-sung was not aiming for the armor. "All ships, target the feeding zones," he announced. "Fire when ready." The human fleet opened fire simultaneously. Hundreds of railgun rounds, nuclear missiles, and kinetic projectiles streaked across space toward the Devourers. But instead of hitting the bioships themselves, they targeted the streams of matter being pulled from the asteroid belt. The effect was immediate. The feeding streams were disrupted, scattered, destroyed. Suddenly, the Devourers were no longer eating. They were being starved. The massive bioships reacted exactly as the humans had predicted. They stopped feeding and turned toward the attacking fleet. Their shapes began to change, growing new weapons, new armor, new defenses. "Phase 2, ordered Commander Dong-hyun. "Begin harassment attacks." The fighter squadrons launched. Thousands of small, fast ships swarmed toward the Devourers like angry insects. They fired constantly but never stayed in one place long enough to be caught. Lieutenant Min-ji dove her fighter between two enormous bioships, firing her weapons at anything that looked important. Her shots did no real damage, but that was not the point. She was forcing the Devourers to waste energy defending against her. "This is Fighter 7, she reported over the radio. "The big one on the left is growing new guns to track us." "Good," replied her squadron leader. "That means it is not using that energy to regenerate damage." This was the key to human tactics. The Devourers were incredibly powerful, but their power had limits. Every time they adapted to counter one threat, they became vulnerable to another. The bioships began to change again. New weapons emerged from their hulls, energy beams that could slice through metal, gravity fields that crushed fighter craft, clouds of aggressive nanobots that ate anything they touched. But the human fighters were ready for this too. They had studied the Devourers' adaptation patterns. They knew exactly how long it took for the bioships to grow new defenses. 30 seconds, just like analyst Yoon-ji had calculated. "All fighters, scatter formation," ordered the squadron leader. "Countdown begins now." The fighters spread out in all directions, making themselves impossible to target effectively. Behind them, the main human fleet was moving closer, but slowly, carefully. On the bridge of the Soul's Fury, Weapons Officer Jae Sung watched his countdown timer. 25 seconds. 20. 15. The Devourer bioships finished growing there. New weapons and began firing at the fighter squadrons. Energy beams cut through space. Gravity fields tried to crush the small human ships. 10 seconds. 5. "Now," whispered Jae Sung. The human fleet fired everything at once, not at the bioships' armor or weapons, but at their bases, the spots where they connected to the massive feeding structure in the center of the system. For exactly 30 seconds, the Devourers could not adapt their defenses. They had used all their energy-growing weapons to fight the fighters. The human attack hit them at their most vulnerable moment. 3 of the 12 bioships were severed from the central structure. Cut off from their power source, they began to die immediately. Their armor became brittle. Their weapons stopped working. Their ability to regenerate failed completely. "Phase 3, ordered Commander Dong-hyun. "Focus fire on the damaged ones." The human fleet concentrated all their firepower on the 3 weakened bioships. Without their regeneration abilities, the Devourers could not repair the damage fast enough. One by one, the giant creatures died. But the remaining 9 bioships were learning. They began to adapt in new ways, growing thicker connections to the central structure, developing better defenses against coordinated attacks. "They are getting smarter," observed the tactical officer. "Good," replied Commander Dong-hyun. "That means they are using energy to think instead of to fight." This was another lesson from Earth's history. Force your enemy to make difficult choices. Make them choose between offense and defense, between survival and victory, between protecting themselves and protecting their goals. The battle continued for 6 hours. The humans never tried to win with a single decisive blow. Instead, they wore down the Devourers slowly, forcing them to waste energy on constant adaptations. Communication Officer Yu Jin coordinated the complex dance of human ships. Fighters distracted the bioships while the main fleet targeted weak points. When the Devourers adapted to fighter attacks, the fleet changed tactics. When they adapted to fleet attacks, the fighters changed their approach. "This is like fighting 9 different enemies at once," she reported. "No," corrected Commander Dong-hyun. "This is like fighting one enemy that cannot decide what it wants to be." By the end of the battle, 5 more bioships had been destroyed. The remaining 4 were badly damaged and nearly exhausted. The central feeding structure was broken in multiple places. But the humans were not finished. "Signal the second fleet," ordered Commander Dong-hyun. "Tell them we have driven the prey toward them." What the Devourers did not know was that this battle was not meant to destroy them completely. It was meant to force them to retreat in a specific direction. The humans had predicted exactly where the damaged bioships would flee, and they had prepared a trap there. As the surviving Devourers limped away from Kepler 442, they headed straight toward what they thought was empty space. Instead, they found another human fleet waiting for them. The second fleet did not give them time to recover. They attacked immediately, targeting the already damaged bioships with overwhelming firepower. Within an hour, the last of the Devourers in the system were dead. Throughout the galaxy, other species watched the battle recordings in amazement. For the first time in millions of years, someone had defeated a Devourer swarm completely. The crystal. Beings of Altara sent a congratulatory message. "Incredible! How did you develop such effective tactics? Admiral Taman's response was simple. We have been fighting monsters for much longer than we have been building spaceships, but the victory at Kepler 442 was just the beginning. Intelligence reports showed devourer swarms moving towards 17 other systems. Each swarm was larger than the one at Kepler 442. The humans began moving their fleets to intercept them. They did not celebrate their victory. They did not rest. They simply moved on to the next target, because that was what predators did. They hunted until there was nothing left to hunt. And somewhere in the depths of space, the ancient devourer intelligence was beginning to realize that it faced something it had never encountered before, an enemy that hunted like it did. 3 months after the first victory, the war had spread across half the galaxy. Everywhere the devourers went, human fleets followed. The aliens who had once laughed at Earth's offer of help now watched in growing amazement and fear. Logistics. Coordinator Wu Jin stood in the massive command center on Luna, Earth's moon. Holographic displays showed the position of every human ship in the galaxy. Supply lines stretched across thousands of light years, feeding the largest military operation in human history. Status report, he requested. 800 star systems. Under threat, replied his aide. We have active operations in 67 of them. Supply convoys are running on schedule to all fronts. And our special cargo? The biological weapons have been deployed to 12 systems. The gravity bombs are ready for use in 6 more. The planet crackers are being moved into position at the Rigel system. Other species had been horrified when they learned about humanity's planet crackers. These were weapons designed to destroy entire worlds by destabilizing their planetary cores. The Galactic Council had banned such weapons millions of years ago, but humans pointed out that the devourers were already destroying planets. At least, this way they could deny the enemy resources while destroying them. On the science vessel Harmony, Dr. Sumin studied captured devourer tissue in her laboratory. She had been working for weeks to create biological weapons that would specifically target the creature's adaptation abilities. Success, she announced to her team. The virus works exactly as designed. She held up a small container filled with what looked like ordinary water. But inside that water were billions of engineered organisms designed for one purpose: to confuse devourer cells until they destroyed themselves. How does it work? Asked her assistant. Devourer cells adapt by reading genetic information from their environment, Sumin explained. Our virus provides false genetic information. When the cells try to adapt, they become something that cannot survive. This was typical of human weapons design. They did not just try to overpower their enemies. They tried to turn the enemy's strengths against them. In the Centauri system, Marine Sergeant Chang Ho led his squad through the twisted corridors of a partially consumed space station. The devourers had been feeding on it for days, and the metal walls were covered with black organic growth. "Movement ahead," whispered one of his Marines. Chang Ho raised his hand for silence. Through his helmet sensors, he could see heat signatures, moving in the darkness ahead. Not bioships this time, but smaller creatures. Devourer ground forces. Remember, he said quietly to his squad, these things adapt to whatever attacks them. So we hit them with everything at once. The Marines attacked simultaneously. Explosive rounds, flame units, electrical weapons, chemical sprays, and kinetic hammers all struck the devourer creatures at the same moment. The creatures tried to adapt, but they could not develop resistance to 6 different types of damage at once. They died quickly, This was how human ground forces fought the Devourers, not with single powerful weapons, but with coordinated attacks, using multiple damage types. It was complicated and required extensive training, but it worked. Meanwhile, in space, the human fleets had developed new tactics. They no longer fought the Devourers in direct battle. Instead, they created what they called kill boxes, areas of space filled with overlapping fields of fire. When Devourer bioships entered these zones, they faced attacks from every direction at once. Kinetic rounds from the left, energy beams from the right, missiles from above, gravity bombs from below. No matter how they adapted, they could not defend against everything simultaneously. Scientist Na Yun worked on the research vessel Discovery, studying Devourer technology recovered from destroyed bioships. What she found was both fascinating and terrifying. They are not just consuming matter, she reported to Earth Command. They are consuming information, genetic codes, computer data, even quantum states. They are eating the history and knowledge of every civilization they encounter. This discovery changed everything. The Devourers were not just destroying civilizations, they were stealing everything those civilizations had ever learned. Millions of years of scientific advancement, art, literature, and philosophy were being devoured along with the planets themselves, but it also revealed a weakness. If they are storing all this information, Na Yun continued, then we can overload their storage capacity, give them too much information to process at once. Human information warfare specialists began developing data bombs, compressed files, containing terabytes of meaningless data designed to crash Devourer biocomputers. When deployed, these weapons could disable entire bioships by forcing their brains to process impossible amounts of random information. The war was becoming more complex every day. Humans fought the Devourers on multiple levels: physical combat in space, biological warfare at the cellular level, and information attacks against their consciousness. But the most effective weapon was still the simplest one: coordination. In the Vega system, Admiral Taemin commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled. 2,000 warships surrounded a massive Devourer hive construct. This was not just a feeding station, but something much worse: a breeding facility where new Devourers were created. "Analysis confirms it," reported his science officer. "They are making more of themselves. If we do not stop this, they will spread faster than we can hunt them." The hive construct was enormous, larger than most planets. It was protected by hundreds of bioships and surrounded by clouds of aggressive nano-organisms. Previous galactic fleets would have declared it impossible to attack. But humans had learned something important during their months of fighting. The Devourers' greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Their ability to adapt to any threat made them powerful, but it also made them predictable. "Begin the demonstration," ordered Admiral Taemin. The human fleet attacked with a small force, only 50 ships. They used conventional weapons and standard tactics. The Devourers adapted quickly, growing defenses specifically designed to counter human kinetic weapons and nuclear explosives. Then the small attack force retreated. "Phase 2, announced the Admiral. A different group of ships attacked, this time using energy weapons and biological agents. Again, the Devourers adapted, developing new countermeasures, and again, the attackers retreated. This continued for 6 hours. Each time, a different group of human ships attacked with different weapons. Each time, the Devourers adapted. Each time, the humans retreated. The aliens observing the battle were confused. Why were the humans not pressing their attacks? Why were they teaching the Devourers how to defend against their weapons? But Admiral Tamin was not trying to destroy the hive construct yet. He was forcing it to adapt to dozens of different attack methods. Each adaptation required energy and processing power. The construct was becoming more complex, but also more unstable. "Sir," reported the tactical officer, "the hive construct has developed defenses against every weapon type we have shown them." "Good," replied the admiral. "Now they think they know how we fight." "Phase 7, he announced to the fleet. "All ships attack simultaneously. Use everything." 2,000 human warships attacked at once, but instead of using the weapons they had demonstrated earlier, they used completely different ones. Gravity weapons, dimensional bombs, reality distortion fields, and weapons that existed only in theoretical physics textbooks. The Devourers tried to adapt, but they had used all their energy adapting to the previous attacks. They had no resources left to counter the real assault. The hive construct died in 17 minutes. As news of the victory spread, other species began to understand what they were witnessing. Humans were not just fighting the Devourers, they were hunting them to extinction with scientific precision. The crystal beings of Altara sent another diplomatic message. "We are grateful for your assistance, but we must ask, what happens when there are no more Devourers to fight?" Admiral Tamin's response was immediate. "Then we go home and tend our gardens." But privately, many aliens wondered if humanity would be able to turn off their war machine once the threat was gone. The humans had become something terrifying, an entire species optimized for violence and destruction. The Zenthari survivors, what few remained, sent their own message. "We thank you for avenging our homeworld, but we fear what the galaxy will become when monsters are the ones who protect it." These concerns would have to wait. Intelligence reports showed that the Devourers were retreating toward the galactic core, where their main nest had been hidden for millions of years. The final battle was coming, and humanity was preparing for it, with the same methodical efficiency they had shown throughout the war. They would either destroy the Devourers completely, or die trying. There would be no middle ground. The center of the galaxy was a place no living being had ever seen. Ancient stars burned with strange colors. Space itself seemed twisted, filled with gravitational storms that could crush planets. And at the very heart of it all was the Nexus. Fleet. Admiral Gite stood on the bridge of the massive command ship Earth's Vengeance, staring at the thing the Devourers had built over millions of years. It was impossible to describe in words. Imagine a city the size of a solar system, but alive. Imagine flesh and metal grown together into shapes that hurt to look at. Imagine something so alien that human minds could barely process what they were seeing. "How many?" he asked quietly. "Sensor readings are difficult," reported his science officer. "We estimate over 10,000 bioships of various sizes. The Nexus itself appears to be a single living entity approximately the size of Jupiter. And our forces? 5,000 ships from Earth, another 2,000 from the colonies. Every vessel humanity has ever built that can carry weapons. It was the largest fleet in human history. It was also probably not enough. The Nexus was more than just a devourer base. It was their central intelligence, their memory core, their breeding ground. For millions of years, it had directed the consumption of entire civilizations. The knowledge and consciousness of countless species was stored within its living computers. "Sir," said Communications Officer Mi Young. "We are receiving transmissions from inside the Nexus. Multiple signals, different languages, different species." "What are they saying?" Mi Young's face was pale. "They are asking for help. Admiral." Gite felt cold. The Devourers had not just killed their victims. They had trapped them inside their collective consciousness, keeping them alive as prisoners for millions of years. "New priority," he announced to the fleet. "This is no longer just about destroying the Devourers. It is about freeing their victims." This changed everything. They could not simply blow up the Nexus anymore. They had to find a way to save the trapped consciousnesses while still destroying their captors. Commando leader Hai Wan prepared her team for the most dangerous mission in human history. They would infiltrate the Nexus itself, fighting through its living defenses to reach the core where the imprisoned minds were held. "Remember," she told her soldiers, "the environment inside will try to kill us in ways we cannot imagine. Trust your equipment, trust each other, and trust nothing else." Her team carried weapons designed specifically for this mission. Quantum disruptors that could cut through living metal, neural scramblers that could confuse biological computers, and something new: consciousness extractors that could theoretically pull trapped minds out of Devourer storage systems. Demolitions. Expert Yeon Ho checked his equipment one final time. His job was simple in concept, but terrifying in execution. He had to plant quantum charges throughout the Nexus that would destroy it completely while giving the rescue teams time to escape with their prisoners. "The charges are set for a 6-hour delay," he explained to Admiral Gi Tae. "That should give us enough time to extract the trapped consciousnesses and get clear." "And if it does not?" Yeon-ho shrugged. "Then we die saving them instead of living, while abandoning them." This was the human way. When faced with an impossible choice, they chose to save others rather than themselves. The battle began with the largest coordinated attack in galactic history. 7,000 human warships opened fire simultaneously on the bioships defending the Nexus. The space around the galactic core lit up like a newborn star as thousands of weapons discharged at once. The Devourers fought back with every adaptation they had learned during months of war with humanity. Their bioships had developed defenses against kinetic weapons, energy beams, biological agents, information warfare, and gravity bombs. But humans had kept one last surprise for this final battle. "Deploy the reality bombs," ordered Admiral Gi Tae. Reality. Bombs were weapons that should not have existed. They were theoretical devices that could temporarily alter the fundamental laws of physics in a small area. Human scientists had worked for months to make them functional, using technologies stolen from a dozen different species. When the reality bombs detonated, the rules changed. In some areas, gravity stopped working. In others, energy and matter became the same thing. Bioships that had adapted to defend against normal weapons found themselves facing attacks that violated the basic laws of nature. The Devourer defenses began to collapse. While the fleet battle raged outside, Commando leader Hai Wan led her team into the Nexus itself. They used small, fast ships to penetrate the living walls of the massive construct. Inside, they found corridors that pulsed like arteries and rooms that breathed like lungs. "This way," said Hai Wan, following her sensors toward the strongest source of the trapped consciousness signals. The Nexus tried to stop them. Walls became weapons. The floor tried to digest their feet. The air itself became poisonous, but human. Commandos had trained for exactly this kind of environment. They fought their way deeper into the alien structure, following the signals of imprisoned minds. Behind them, demolitions expert Yan Ho planted his charges at key structural points. The Nexus was enormous, but it had weak spots. Destroy enough of them, and the entire construct would collapse. "Charges placed," he reported over the radio. "Timer is running." In the deepest part of the Nexus, Haywan's team found something that would haunt their dreams forever. A vast chamber filled with what looked like glowing trees made of flesh and metal. Each tree held thousands of trapped consciousnesses, keeping them alive but imprisoned. "There are millions of them," whispered one of her soldiers. "Then we save millions of them," Haywan replied. They began connecting their consciousness extractors to the biotrees. The process was slow and dangerous. Each extraction required precise timing and perfect equipment. One mistake could destroy the mind they were trying to save. Outside, the space battle was reaching its climax. Human ships fought desperately to hold the perimeter while their comrades worked inside the Nexus. Bioships fell by the hundreds, but more kept emerging from hidden bays within the construct. "Sir," reported the tactical officer, "we are losing ships faster than we can replace them." "Hold the line," ordered Admiral Gite. "Whatever it takes, hold the line." Inside the Nexus, Haywan's team was running out of time. They had extracted thousands of consciousnesses, but there were still millions more. The quantum charges would detonate in less than an hour. "We cannot save them all," reported one of her soldiers. "Then we save who we can," Haywan replied. But her voice was breaking. To save the galaxy, they would have to abandon millions of innocent minds to destruction. Then Communications Officer Mi Young made a discovery that changed everything. "The trapped consciousnesses are connected to each other," she reported. "They form a collective network. If we can extract the core nodes, the entire network should transfer with them. It was risky. If they were wrong, they would lose everyone. But if they were right, they could save all the imprisoned minds at once." "Do it," ordered Admiral Gite. Haywan's team focused on the central biotree, the one that seemed to coordinate all the others. They connected every consciousness extractor they had to this single node and began the extraction process. The Nexus screamed. It was not a sound, but something worse, a telepathic shriek of rage and agony that every human in the fleet could feel. The Devourers realized what was happening. They were not just losing their prisoners. They were losing their memory, their history, their accumulated knowledge of millions of years. The bioships defending the Nexus went berserk. They abandoned all tactics and threw themselves at the human fleet in waves of desperate fury. "All ships! Emergency power to shields!" ordered Admiral Gite. "Whatever happens, protect the extraction team." Inside the Nexus, the consciousness extraction was working. Millions of trapped minds flowed through the extractors into portable storage devices. Beings who had been prisoners for millions of years were finally being freed. But the process was taking too long. The quantum charges would detonate in 15 minutes, and the extraction was only halfway complete. "Sir," reported Yeon Ho, "I can reset the charges for a longer delay, but I would have to stay behind to do it manually." This meant certain death. The Nexus would collapse around him, and there would be no way to escape. "Do it," ordered Haywan, without hesitation. "No," said Yeon Ho. "I will do it because it is the right thing to do." He disconnected his radio and began moving toward the quantum charges. His teammates wanted to follow him, but the extraction process required their full attention. The consciousness transfer completed with 3 minutes to spare. Millions of imprisoned minds were now safely stored in human devices, ready to be given new bodies and new lives. "Extraction complete," reported Haywan. "All teams evacuate immediately." The commandos raced through the collapsing corridors of the Nexus as Yan-Ho manually triggered the quantum charges. The massive construct began to tear itself apart from the inside. Outside, the human fleet was in full retreat. Ships that had survived months of warfare were finally overwhelmed by the desperate fury of the dying devourers. But they had accomplished their mission. The prisoners were free, and the Nexus was dying. Admiral Gite watched from the bridge of his ship as the Nexus collapsed. The explosion was visible from thousands of light years away, a new star.